I want to buy, a little girl said, sliding a worn $2 bill across the gleaming glass counter to Ethan Granger. The billionaire who owned Granger's toys paused mid-scan with his hand hovering over a boxed train set before slowly lowering it. For a brief moment, he was no longer just the successful businessman, surrounded by festive music and smooth marble floors. He was simply a man looking at a child whose words had unlocked something inside him. She could not have been older than 6. Her name, as he would soon find out, was Emily Wilson. At that instant, she was just a tiny figure with pigtails tied by faded pink ribbons and oversized sneakers that seemed a size too big. 2 aisles away, she stood near the corner of aisle 5, partly hidden between a rack of stuffed animals and a clearance bin. She watched the counter nervously as though gathering the courage to take a huge leap. She neither touched anything nor spoke, standing still with her hands clutching something inside her coat pocket. A teenage employee noticed her lingering. "Hey, kid," the girl snapped. "If you are not buying, don't just hang around. You need to leave." Emily flinched and took a cautious step back. Her eyes shifted quickly from the tall clerk toward the automatic doors at the store's entrance. She looked as if she was about to run away. "Wait," Ethan said suddenly from behind the counter. His voice was soft, yet it pierced through the tension in the air. The clerk's eyes widened in surprise. "Mr. Granger?" Ethan noticed the fear in them. The little girl's shoulders tensed as she tried to avoid any confrontation. He stepped out from behind the counter and lowered himself slightly, keeping his voice soft and calm. "It's okay," he reassured her. "She is not bothering anyone." Then he looked at the girl and asked warmly, "What is your name, sweetheart?" Emily paused for a moment before slowly coming closer to the counter. Her hand reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a worn $2 bill along with some loose coins and a single subway token. "I want to buy a dad," she said quietly, but with certainty. Ethan glanced around, sensing a sudden hush in the store. The usual cheerful jingling music continued overhead, but the buzz of conversations had fallen silent. A few grown-ups nearby stopped in their tracks, and even the teenage cashier stood motionless. "What did you say?" Ethan asked gently, lowering himself to meet her gaze. "A dad," she repeated with more confidence this time. "My sister told me you sell everything here, so I brought all my money." Ethan extended his hand and she grasped it with a small, firm grip. Her palm was warm and slightly sticky. "I'm Ethan," he said. "I own this store, and as much as I want to help you, we don't sell people here." Emily's expression dropped, not with anger or tears, but with a quiet sadness that felt deeper than any outburst. "Oh," she whispered, looking down at her hand. "I thought that maybe if I saved enough, I could have a dad for Christmas. Some kids at school have them. They go to the park and sit on their shoulders. They do not always seem so exhausted." Ethan felt a pressure tightening in his chest. He recalled the night his father had collapsed on the sidewalk just outside their family's old construction site. He remembered being 7 years old, staring down the hallway after the phone call arrived and asking his mother, "Can I use my allowance to bring Daddy back?" No inheritance, no empire built in the last 20 years had softened that painful memory. "Where is your mom, Emily?" he asked. "She passed away last year." "Cancer?" Emily answered simply. "And my sister works a lot, so I stay with Ms. Carroll next door when Jenny is away. But she is not my mom, and I don't have a dad." Ethan was about to say more when suddenly the door swung open. The sharp jingle of the holiday bell cut through the quiet. A woman's voice called out, "Emily!" Turning, they saw Jenny, a young woman wearing a faded red diner uniform. She hurried toward them, her face both beautiful and tense with anxiety. Her hair had come loose from its bun and stuck to her cheeks. She dropped down beside Emily without hesitation. "I am sorry," Jenny whispered, embracing her sister tightly. "I looked everywhere, baby." "You can't just run away like that," Emily explained, pointing toward the counter. "I was trying to buy us a dad, but I don't have enough money." Jenny's eyes flickered toward Ethan, and in that brief moment he noticed her expression change from panic to embarrassment, then anger, and finally to shame. She stood up, placing herself protectively between Emily and him, saying, "I am sorry she disturbed you," Jenny said coolly. "She tends to get ideas sometimes." "She did not bother me," Ethan replied softly. "She reminded me of why I began this place." Jenny blinked, then asked May, "I escort you both to the door?" "We are fine," Emily answered, taking Emma's hand as they prepared to leave. Ethan remained rooted, observing the two small figures moving toward the exit. The little girl had attempted to purchase something the world insisted she was unworthy of, and the woman carrying her bore that weight alone, held together with coffee stains and late-night shifts. Just before they stepped outside, he called out, "Wait." Jenny paused briefly and turned to your name. He inquired, "What was it?" "Jenny. Jenny Wilson." He gave a slight nod, not expecting a smile, but she offered one anyway, just a faint, tired curve. Then they disappeared, and Ethan Granger, billionaire without children and alone, stood behind the counter of his empire, shaken by a girl with a dinosaur button and $2 to spare for a father. For the first time in 10 years, he was unsure that money could solve everything. That evening, Ethan Granger sat by himself in his penthouse office overlooking Fifth Avenue. The city lights shimmered through the tall windows like restless thoughts. The leather chair creaked softly as he leaned forward, elbows on the mahogany desk, staring blankly at the open file in front of him. It was a product proposal for a digital toy series he could not focus on. The phrase "I want to buy a dad" kept repeating in his mind, making it hard for him to ignore the little girl's voice. Ethan had encountered many things in his lifetime: business proposals, investor warnings, and desperate workers pleading for one more opportunity. Yet none of those moments stayed with him like that single line. It reminded him of when he was a child, standing over his father's coffin with a pocket full of marbles, and the innocent belief that if he let enough fall, maybe God would make a trade. He exhaled deeply, pressing his fingers to his temple as the city below buzzed relentlessly. But up here the world felt slower, as if something sacred had been disturbed. He tapped the intercom and said, "Call Marshall." Moments later, his assistant's voice responded, "Yes, sir." He instructed, "Find out everything you can about a Jenny Wilson, late 20s, living in the Bronx. She has a younger sister named Emily, about 6 or 7. "Understood, sir," came the reply. Leaning back in his chair, Ethan felt a mix of unease and a strange sense of resolve. The following morning, Jenny Wilson was late once again. She hurried out from the back door of Nestor's Diner, still fastening her apron behind her. Her short shift there, the only job that didn't stretch into daylight, was ending just as she was about to start another in the uptown office buildings, cleaning rooms. Between that, her evening hours at the laundromat and weekend babysitting duties, she barely had a moment to rest or think. 4 jobs, 4 different uniforms, and none of them earned enough. She reached the subway platform just as the doors began to close. The train roared past, leaving her standing there out of breath, her eyes filled with tears. Fatigue she refused to show, she reached into her coat pocket and found the small dinosaur pin that Emily had fastened to her sweater that morning. It made her heart tighten as Emily whispered, "It's for luck. You need it more than me." She felt like laughing and crying simultaneously. The previous evening, Jenny had barely reprimanded Emily. Seeing her little sister in that huge toy store, holding out 2 wrinkled dollars with so much hope in her eyes, had broken her. How do you explain to a child that love cannot be purchased? She glanced at Mr. Granger, calm and composed, clearly someone accustomed to control. For a moment she resented him, not for his wealth, but for the ease in which he addressed Emily, as if the world always bowed slightly for men like him. Yet something in his eyes revealed he was not cold. He appeared shocked, moved, and human. Still, men like him rarely remember girls like her. But Ethan Granger was not the sort who forgets things that impact him. By midday, Marshall returned with a file. Jenny Wilson, age 27, high school graduate, no college, legal guardian of her younger sister, Emily Rose Wilson. Their mother, Marie, had died from breast cancer a year and a half ago. The father was unknown on the birth certificate. Jenny worked 4 jobs, lived in a rent-controlled apartment in the Bronx, with no complaints, no criminal record, and no child services assistance. Neighbors described her as stubborn as an ox, but kind as the sky. Ethan examined the photographs carefully. One of them was Jenny standing at her apartment entrance, her hair tied back as she held a basket full of laundry. Emily was peeking shyly from behind her legs. Another scene showed Jenny boarding a bus, her eyes distant and half closed from pure exhaustion. Her tiredness was evident even in motionless shots. Marshall whispered quietly, "She manages everything on her own. No backup, no help." Ethan gave a slow nod. The father, Marshall hesitated. "There is no sign of him from what I have gathered. Jenny never even met him." Their mother gave birth to Emily late in life after her divorce. It's possible she used a donor or simply didn't want to disclose anything. Ethan tapped the file and closed it. He arranged for a meeting with the store managers. I want to start something, a grant that stays low-key, Marshall agreed. The girl asked for a father figure, not a scholarship. I cannot offer her what she wants, but maybe I can provide her sister with the means to continue being what she already is. An absolute miracle. That night, Jenny's fourth shift at the laundromat dragged on past midnight. Folding clothes beneath the tired buzz of flickering fluorescent lights, the bell above the door chimed softly. She glanced up to see a tall man in a navy coat holding a big paper bag. I'm sorry, she said automatically, brushing hair from her forehead. We are closing. I know, he replied as he stepped closer, but I thought you might need some dinner. She stood frozen. Mr. Granger, he offered, revealing pulled pork sandwiches from Clark's and genuinely sweet tea. Emily told me you skip meals, Jenny. He stared at him, his lips parting as if trying to find words. How did you... She reminded me of someone I once was. A long pause hung in the air. She remained still. I am not here to pity you, he said firmly. I do not want to rescue you because you do not require that, he continued. I only wanted to express my gratitude for holding on to her hope. Jenny finally accepted the bag, her hands trembling. Why have you really come? Ethan hesitated, then spoke softly. Because a little girl gave me $2 and reminded me of what true wealth means. If this touched your heart, please give Jenny and Emily a like, and do not forget to share where you are watching from. You never know who nearby might be watching as well. Jenny blinked hard, and for the first time in countless years, she no longer felt isolated. Rain tapped steadily against the window pane, while Emily sat cross-legged on the worn, braided rug inside their small apartment. The cozy living room carried faint scents of fried onions from dinner and lavender from sachets her sister had placed in drawers to ward off roaches. In her lap was the new doll Mr. Granger had gifted her 2 nights ago, wrapped delicately in tissue and ribbon, like something out of a dream. She had not let go of it since. It was not merely a doll. It was soft and brown like her, with braids like hers, and a dress resembling something from a fairy tale. Emily named her Hope. At bedtime, she whispered secrets into Hope's ear, and even shared bits of her grilled cheese at lunch. But today, as she nervously fiddled with the doll's back buttons, something inside her shifted. Emily literally froze, ears sharp as she turned the doll over again with her fingers. Running her hand along the seam behind its hairline, she discovered a tiny bump, barely perceptible. With a gentle pull, a flap opened to reveal a small folded note and another object, a golden pin shaped like a compass rose. Holding her breath, she unfolded the note. It read, "For the brave one who notices what others miss. This is not a toy, it is a key. Keep it safe. E.G." Emily stared at the message, her mouth agape, her heart racing just like when she played hide-and-seek and footsteps crept closer. Was this a game, a secret quest, or something more? She glanced toward the kitchen where Jenny sorted bills under the flickering stove light. Her sister looked exhausted, eyes rimmed in red, rubbing her temples just like she did when the numbers were wrong. Emily hesitated, not wanting to add to the burden Jenny already carried, so she carefully refolded the note, slipped it back into the doll, and remained silent for now. Meanwhile, downtown Ethan Granger sat in a boardroom, thick with the scent of money and impatience. His advisory committee executives droned on about quarterly forecasts and shrinking global toy markets. But he was not paying attention. His mind wandered back to the Bronx, imagining the wide-eyed girl holding out her $2 bill as if it were treasure. His thoughts drifted to Jenny standing confidently in that laundromat, chin raised and voice steady despite the circumstances. The situation was anything but ordinary. Ethan looked up at Lawrence Chen, the CFO. Lawrence frowned. We were checking if you had examined the security measures concerning Project Castor. There has been talk on the dark web about encrypted files with matching signatures. We need authorization to carry out a full internal investigation. Ethan's face darkened. Not yet, I said. Not yet, Ethan snapped, then softened his tone. Give me 72 hours. If I cannot provide answers by then, you have your investigation. Heads nodded, but a sense of unease spread across the room. Later, alone in his office, Ethan opened a secure drawer and pulled out a flat black case. Inside was a compass-shaped pin, identical to the one hidden inside Emily Wilson's doll. a relic, and a symbol. He pressed the pin carefully and a dim glow pulsed along its edge. Only a handful of people worldwide understood its significance. Even fewer had ever held one. Now, a 6-year-old girl had one too. That weekend, Jenny noticed Emily had changed. She was quieter, more reflective, played less, and observed more. Her questions came in sudden bursts. What does it mean to be chosen? What if someone gives you a gift but never explains why? Can people hide something good, not just bad? Jenny did her best to respond, trying to dismiss the growing worry inside her. But one night, after Emily had fallen asleep clutching the doll, Jenny picked it up to fix the blanket and felt a small bump. She paused, uncertain, then gently she located the flap and lifted it, allowing the note to fall into her palm. She read it once, twice, then her face turned pale. This was not a plaything, and it was no accident. The following morning, Jenny waited outside the toy shop before it opened. She ignored her commitments and social engagements, standing there because she needed answers. To her astonishment, Ethan Granger was already present, pacing near the display windows like a man unable to escape his own conscience. When he noticed her, he straightened up and said, "You found it." Quietly, Jenny nodded, holding up the note. "What is this, Ethan? What are you involved in?" He glanced around and beckoned her inside, then locked the doors behind them. "I used to be part of something," he began softly, "a covert network of individuals who believed that true change did not arise from public campaigns or politics, but emerged from the shadows. They observed, assisted, and intervened where no official system could ever reach." Jenny frowned. "Are you talking about vigilantes?" "No, guardians," Ethan clarified. "Silent hands pulling strings. We discovered talent where others saw nothing. We protected those overlooked." He paused. "Emily reminded me of someone we failed long ago." Opening his desk drawer, he placed another pin beside hers. "Only 12 of these remain, and Emily holds one because I saw something in her that I have not encountered in decades." Jenny's breath caught. She was just a child, yet attentive and courageous, and perhaps this was her destiny. "I never asked for any of this," Ethan admitted softly, "but maybe she did." They stood quietly until Jenny finally voiced the question that had troubled her for so long. After reading the note, Ethan's expression turned grave because something was approaching, and she might perceive what others would overlook, just as her mother had once done. Jenny's eyes grew wide. "You knew my mother." Ethan looked away. "More than you realize." Outside the city, life went on unperturbed, but inside that toy shop, everything had changed irrevocably. The days that followed felt heavier, as if the air in their apartment had thickened with an unspoken presence, something Jenny could not put into words but sensed each time she glanced at Emily, her younger sister. Emily no longer inquired about cartoons or the sweets aisle at the local store. Instead, she intently observed people on the subway, silently studying their faces, always watching. One morning, while waiting for the laundromat dryer to finish, Emily pulled on Jenny's sleeve and asked, "Did Mom ever have a secret job?" Jenny looked down sharply. "What?" Mr. Granger had mentioned how she noticed things others missed. Jenny knelt and cradled Emily's face. "Sweetheart, Mom worked 2 shifts cleaning hotel rooms and still made time to kiss us goodnight. That was her job." "But did she do anything else?" Emily pressed, hoping for some secret acts of kindness. Jenny did not respond immediately because, honestly, she was unsure. Their mother had always held a quiet presence, a unique way of listening without blinking, seeing beyond appearances, and sometimes during the night Jenny had found her standing by the window, whispering names under her breath, names Jenny had never heard before. After Emily was settled in bed, Jenny retrieved an old shoebox from the closet filled with their mother's mementos. Inside were pressed flowers, a broken pocket watch, and a single faded photograph showing their mother with a man Jenny did not recognize. At the very bottom, wrapped in a plastic bag, lay a crumpled napkin stained with smudged ink. The name scrawled across it sent a chill through her. Ethan Granger. The following day, Jenny returned to the toy store just as dawn broke. A thin fog clung to the windows, and Ethan was already inside, carefully polishing a wooden train as if it held the secrets to the universe. "I found something," Jenny announced upon entering. Before he could unlock the door, he glanced up. She placed the napkin on the counter and asked, "You wrote your name on this?" Ethan's expression stayed neutral, but his eyes revealed a deeper story: sorrow, guilt, and maybe shame. He spoke softly. She was my contact before starting a family. She worked with us in Memphis, then in Washington, D.C., and briefly in New York. Jenny felt her throat tighten. So it's true, she whispered. She left the team after something went wrong. Ethan nodded. There was an operation in Raleigh where an informant was compromised. She blamed herself and wanted out. Jenny barely breathed. She never mentioned any of this? Ethan replied quietly, "She was protecting you." A heavy silence filled the room. Jenny finally asked, "Why reveal this now? Why Emily?" Ethan folded his hands on the counter and said, "We're restarting a search project called Castor. It's not an assignment, more a precaution. Something from many years ago had resurfaced. A forgotten database filled with the names of children, adults, quiet heroes, all watched closely by those who wished to silence them. We thought it disappeared, but it never truly did. Jenny guessed someone was selling fragments of it, and Emily discovered the first clue either by chance or perhaps deliberately." Jenny's voice faltered. She was 6. Ethan nodded, observing she was already more perceptive than many adults he knew. That evening, Jenny sat Emma down gently, saying, "I want to share something about Mom." Emma blinked slowly, realizing she was one of them, wasn't she? Jenny hesitated. She was strong, braver than we ever realized. She helped others quietly, behind the scenes. Emily nodded solemnly, her small hands gripping the doll's waist tightly. "Maybe that is why I have it now." Jenny reached out softly, tucking a strand of Emma's hair behind her ear. "No matter what happens, promise to tell me everything." Emma nodded. "Even if it feels strange, especially if it feels strange." Emma gave the first smile in days, then whispered, "I think the man in the alley is watching us." Jenny's body tensed. "What man?" "The one in the long coat. He doesn't blink. I saw him near the shop, then near the school. He moves like a shadow." Jenny hurried to the window. Outside, the street appeared ordinary. Cars passing, a dog walker, a woman pushing a stroller. Yet Jenny knew better than to ignore Emily's warning. Ethan had hinted that something was coming, and maybe it already had arrived. The following morning, Jenny walked Emma to school herself, eyes scanning every face, every parked vehicle, every open doorway. Standing by the school entrance, nothing felt quite right. Emily hesitated before stepping inside. "Will you tell Mr. Granger?" She asked quietly about the man, the doll, and the key. Then she added, "And what did I read last night?" Jenny froze, waiting anxiously. Emily reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper, unlike the one from before. This one was older, stained and fragile. "I found it inside the doll's stuffing. It was hidden so deeply I almost missed it." Jenny carefully unfolded the note, revealing faded handwriting that said, "If you are reading this, the list has been activated. Watch for the initials CD and the phrase Blue Harvest. Trust no one in uniform and remember the name Reynard Walters." Jenny felt the world shift beneath her feet. "Where exactly did you find this?" she whispered. Emily's voice trembled. "Inside Hope's chest, tucked away in the corner." That evening, Jenny did not return home. Instead, she took the train heading towards the Lower East Side and tracked down an old contact her mother had mentioned once, a man named Theo, who owned a bookstore without any sign outside. When she showed him the note, Theo's hand trembled. "Reynard Walters," he muttered with a dry voice. "He is not just a name, he is a ghost. If his name is surfacing again, someone is about to face danger." "Who is he?" Jenny pressed. Theo stared at her with weary eyes. "He is the man your mother could not save." Suddenly, Jenny understood everything. Whatever her mother left behind was not buried in the past anymore. It was right there in their living room, unfolding once again. Her younger sister's doll had started moving again. It was nearly midnight when Jenny got home, her mind a storm of names, fragments, and questions. She kept hearing Theo's voice echoing inside her. "The man your mother couldn't rescue. Reynard Walters. Blue Harvest CD." The words felt like shattered glass, pressing against something hidden deep within her memories. Something she never realized she recalled until now. She found Emily curled up on the couch, still dressed in her school clothes, clutching the doll tightly. Her breathing slow and steady, peaceful, unaware of the chaos swirling around them. Jenny watched her silently for several moments, then bent down, carefully picked up the doll and turned it over her fingers, shaking as she unstitched the seam along its back, exposing the hollow once more. Besides the note, there was something else hidden beneath the stitching, a grainy black and white photograph showing a man in uniform with broad shoulders and a thick mustache standing before an aircraft hangar. On the back, someone had handwritten in blue ink, "Catching trust, only the lights that blink once." Jenny murmured the phrase softly, "Trust only the lights that blink once." She did not get any sleep that night. By morning, Jenny had pieced everything together on the back of a grocery slip, from Ethan's details to Theo's warnings, the note and the photo her mother had left them. Clues hidden inside the doll like a secret time capsule. Now she had no option but to follow it. That afternoon, Jenny returned to Ethan's shop. He stood by the window, intently watching something happening across the street. "Did you know about Reynard?" she inquired as she walked inside. Ethan stayed silent at first, then nodded slowly. "He was our protector, the compass for our field operations. If he's making a return, it means something is seriously wrong." "What does Blue Harvest signify?" Jenny pressed. Ethan faced her, his gaze shadowed with meaning. "It was a code word, a fallback in case our network was infiltrated. Blue stood for data. Harvest meant names. If you encountered that phrase, it implied someone was gathering information again, reconstructing the surveillance network. CD was the code name for a handler we were never allowed to meet. It was always a cold day when they appeared. No one knew their true identity, only that people disappeared after their arrival. Jenny felt overwhelmed by the gravity of it all crashing down on her. "You must tell me precisely what my mother was involved in." Ethan hesitated, then gestured toward the back of the store, where an old wooden-paneled office sat, locked behind a door she had never noticed before. He opened it carefully, revealing a wall plastered with photographs, strings, and maps, looking like something out of a conspiracy thriller, yet this was real life. "She was a mapper," Ethan explained. "She tracked patterns no one else could perceive, uncovered connections between people who believed they were invisible. Traffickers, corrupt officials, hit squads. She wasn't just doing janitorial work. She was gathering voices." Jenny stared at the intricate web unfolding on the wall before her. She recognized her mother in 3 different photographs, one featuring a man she now assumed was Reynard, another showing her standing in front of a post office, and the last a blurred shot of her at the edge of a demonstration. Her face was partly hidden, holding Emily as a baby. "She never shared any of this with me, Jenny," she whispered. "She couldn't. Ethan said you were her cover, her source of hope." Jenny faced him, her voice growing intense. "Then why is Emma involved in this now?" "Because someone believes she has access to what your mother concealed, and that person is watching." Jenny took out the photo Emma had discovered. "Do these blinking lights mean anything to you?" Ethan examined the picture, narrowing his eyes. "There's a safe house in Queens, where the front porch light signals once for friends and twice for threats. It's old-fashioned, but if this message is genuine, that location might be our next clue." That evening, while packing Emily's things into a compact overnight bag, the little girl asked quietly, "Are we going on a trip?" "Yes," Jenny answered, "just for a night or two." "Will it be safe?" Emily wondered. Jenny hesitated before assuring, "I will protect you." Emily gazed at her with those sharp, insightful eyes that had even unsettled Ethan. "Did Mom ever do dangerous things too?" Jenny nodded slowly but said, "Always with good reasons." Emily hugged her doll and whispered, "Then I want to do the right things too." They took a taxi to Queens, moving through a dusk that seemed unusually silent, where every passerby seemed suspicious and every parked van felt like a sign of danger. Upon arrival at the address Ethan had given them appeared deserted. The paint was peeling and weeds were overtaking the porch, while the mailbox was stuffed with flyers. When Jenny stepped onto the porch, the motion light flickered once, then went out. She glanced at Emily and whispered, "That is our signal." They moved inside quietly, with Jenny gripping a small canister of pepper spray she had concealed in her jacket. The air inside was thick with dust and the weight of forgotten memories. The hallway was adorned with framed photographs, all showing different smiling black children, a silent collection from the past. At the back of the house, A shadowy figure stood still, causing Jenny to stop in her tracks. She called out, "Who are you?" The figure slowly stepped forward, hands raised. "My name is Lyle. I was your mother's second contact. She told me to wait for a sign." Jenny asked, "What sign?" Lyle pointed directly at Emily and the doll she carried. "That face and that doll. She said one day they would reunite." Jenny's voice faltered as she asked, "Do you know what she hid?" Nod brought Lyle to pull a metal case the size of a book from a drawer, which he handed to Emily. Only the girl would be able to open it. Emily examined the lock, then reached into the doll's pouch and pulled out a key. The case clicked open to reveal a single USB stick marked in red as Project Redemption. Lyle stepped back, explaining, "That drive contains the names of every official who authorized surveillance on children like you." Jenny asked hopelessly, "Why?" Lyle answered quietly, "Because silence is deadlier than bullets. Your mother hoped someone would find the bravery to speak up, and now perhaps that someone was Emily." Jenny knelt beside her sister, sensing the immense burden. The threat, the inheritance, the decision. Emily gently held the USB drive in her fingertips, lifted her gaze to Jenny, and said, "I believe this is exactly what I was meant to discover." Jenny gave a silent nod, and together they stepped outside into the fog, walking toward whatever awaited them. The following morning arrived dull and heavy, with a gentle drizzle running down the window of the simple motel room where Jenny and Emily had taken shelter. Emily sat cross-legged on the bed, still clad in her pajama top, idly turning the USB drive between her delicate hands. She spoke little. Her usual youthful wonder was muted, shadowed by the quiet realization that the device she held was far from ordinary. Jenny had hardly slept, her body still but her mind racing through the night, replaying every word Lyle had said, every picture on the wall in Ethan's back room, and every whispered murmur from Emily as she dreamed. Everything had changed. The woman who raised her had done so with caution, always watching her own back, and now Jenny carried the burden of a conflict she never chose. Suddenly, her burner phone vibrated. She grabbed it from the nightstand with a quick heart. The caller ID showed blocked. She answered calmly, saying, "Hello." A man's voice replied, low and steady, "You have opened the case." Jenny's throat tightened. "Who is this?" she asked. "I am the one your mother was supposed to meet before she vanished, but she never got the chance." They reached her first. Jenny's breath caught as she said your name, then paused briefly. "That name was given to me, but I no longer use it." "What do you want?" "I want to ensure her efforts were not wasted. I want to help you and the girl survive long enough to reveal the contents of that drive." Jenny's eyes shifted toward Emily, who remained quietly occupied. "Why should I believe you?" "Because your mother trusted me, and if you do not move within the next 6 hours, your whereabouts will soon become known." Jenny's body tensed. "You mean someone is coming?" "Not just someone, many are coming, and they will not announce their arrival." Jenny whispered, "Where do we go?" "There's a man named Marcus Trammell, a retired Marine who oversees a community center in Newark. Ask for the basement. I will be waiting there." The call ended. Jenny stared at the phone, then looked at Emily. "Gather your things," she said softly. "We must leave." The journey to Newark unfolded as a mix of congested roads, mounting unease, and fast food stops. Emily gazed quietly outside, her reflection faint against the window. Jenny's grip on the USB drive hidden in her coat pocket never loosened. They reached the community center around midday. It was a red brick building wedged between two vacant lots. A group of teenagers shot hoops on a battered court in front, while an elderly man swept the sidewalk, humming a classic Otis Reading melody. Inside, the center had the scent of polished wood floors, perspiration, and cafeteria air. Lunches and a strange sense of comfort brought back memories for Jenny of middle school trips as they approached the front desk. A young woman with braids and a clipboard glanced up. Jenny leaned closer and said, "We have an appointment with Marcus Trammell. He is expecting us." The woman did not say a word, but simply nodded and gestured toward the hallway leading to the basement stairs on the left. They moved through the dimly lit corridor until they arrived at a heavy steel door labeled Maintenance. Jenny knocked twice before the door slowly opened. Ethan appeared, sturdy like a refrigerator, broad-shouldered, and in his mid-50s with speckled gray stubble and a limp in his right leg. He was dressed casually in a plain black hoodie and jeans, yet his eyes held the look of a soldier. "Are you Jenny?" he asked. She nodded. "And is that the girl, Emily?" He stepped aside and said, "Come in." The basement was unexpectedly warm, filled with old bookshelves, a couple of folding tables, and a worn-out couch. At the center was a small terminal connected to a secure satellite link. "I have kept this setup off the grid for 7 years," Ethan said. "But for this mission, I am willing to take the risk." Jenny handed him the drive. "Before you open it, what exactly will we find?" He glanced toward Emily. "The past and the future." He inserted the drive, and lines of code began to scroll across the screen, soon followed by folders named with dates and mysterious labels, such as Sunflower 13, Dust Post, South Indigo Cell, and finally, Echo Kid. Ethan selected the last folder, and suddenly thousands of files appeared. Surveillance footage, voice recordings, intercepted communications, and photographs mostly. The focus was on families, especially black families, being monitored under the pretense of educational support programs or behavioral health evaluations. It was a methodical, institutional process, hidden from the public eye. Marcus's jaw clenched as he said, "My goodness, this is not just surveillance. This is social manipulation." Jenny moved closer and added, "You're saying they were not only observing but deliberately influencing results, intentionally failing some children, diverting funds, and even alerting the police about supposed problem families that did not truly exist." Emily whispered, "So they were causing harm to people like us." Jenny knelt down beside her. "Exactly. But now we are going to put an end to it." Marcus glanced at both of them and warned, "You understand that if you expose this, it will destroy far more than reputations. There will be lawsuits, investigations, perhaps even court cases." Jenny spoke softly. "That is what my mother sacrificed her life for." Marcus nodded, his eyes shining. "Then we begin tonight." Later that evening, after a quick dinner and several rounds of password encryption, Marcus established a secure communication channel with an old contact in Washington, D.C., a journalist named Camille Booker, who had previously revealed voter suppression practices in Alabama. They sent her a portion of the logs, enough to spark her interest. "Where did you obtain this?" she demanded through the speaker. His sister Jenny answered, "And a woman who sacrificed her life for the truth." Camille hesitated before saying, "I will need 72 hours. Then it goes public." Jenny closed her eyes and said, "That's all the time we require." Emily gently tugged at her arm. "Can I do something too?" Jenny smiled gently. "You already have, sweetheart." That night, as Emma fell asleep on the basement couch and Jenny sat close by, a shadow crossed the security camera in the alley. Marcus frowned and reached for his sidearm. "They are early," he said with a grim tone. Jenny stood up, her heart pounding. The game had started, and they were no longer mere survivors. They had become the storm. The first sound was soft, just a metallic click from the alley camera feed. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he turned the volume up. There was another subtle scrape of boots, careful and well-coordinated, unlike street thugs or random kids. Jenny rose from the floor where she had been covering Emily with a fleece blanket. Her body tightened as she looked at Marcus. "How many are there?" he answered without meeting her gaze. "Too many to feel safe. 4, maybe 5. Possibly more out of sight. Tactical, not random." Jenny's breath hitched. "Then they found us." Emily suddenly sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Is it morning?" Jenny knelt down and brushed hair off her forehead. "Not yet, baby. But you need to stay very quiet, okay?" Emily nodded quietly, whispering, "Okay." Marcus acted swiftly, locking the basement door and flicking a switch behind a shelf. The back wall shifted slightly to reveal a narrow, hidden passage leading deeper into the foundation. It was an old bootlegger tunnel running beneath the alley into a neighboring building. "You two, go! I will hold them off," Jenny snapped. "You're not staying here alone." Marcus's eyes showed no hesitation. "This is not a choice. You have the drive. You are the heritage. I am merely a man buying you time." Before she could continue arguing, suddenly, a heavy thud shook the ceiling as if a battering ram hit the main door upstairs. Emma let out a quiet whimper. Jenny turned toward her and whispered, "Go with Marcus now. I will be right behind you." Marcus handed Jenny a shortwave radio set to Channel 3. "I will signal when it is safe or if you need to escape," he said. Jenny nodded. Stay alive, you too. She gathered Emily into her arms, clutching the USB drive tightly against her chest. They hurried into the hallway as Marcus sealed the panel behind them. From the other side of the wall came the sound of the upper door being forced open, followed by heavy boots pounding down the wooden stairs. Commands were shouted in clipped code, mixed with the unmistakable crackling of military radios. Jenny quickened her pace, feeling the cold concrete beneath her feet, her shoulder brushing past pipes and insulation. The tunnel smelled of dampness and metal, as though time itself had been locked away. Emily held on silently. No tears now, only trust. At the tunnel's end was another locked panel. Jenny pulled a lever, and it creaked open to reveal a dusty maintenance room beneath a closed auto parts store. She pulled Emily through and gently closed the door behind them, latching it softly. Static buzzed on the shortwave radio. Then Marcus's voice came through, tight and breathless. Two inside, breach confirmed. Holding them at the stairwell exit northeast. Do not double back. Jenny swallowed hard and replied, Copy that. She looked at Emily and said, We have to move. Quelling any noise, they slipped through the store's side entrance and stepped out into the crisp, early morning air. A light fog still cloaked the damp pavement. They dashed through narrow back streets, avoiding overflowing trash bins and clambering past fire escapes. The city around them was silent, yet somehow complicit. At last, they arrived at a modest bus station. Jenny, using emergency money hidden in her coat, small bills her mother had once tucked inside an envelope, marked Rainy Day Real Rain, purchased 2 tickets to Trenton with fake names. Sitting in the back row of the bus, Emily rested her head on Jenny's arm and asked, Is Mr. Marcus going to be okay? Jenny looked outside and answered, He's brave just like you. Am I brave? Emily inquired. Jenny kissed her forehead softly. You are the bravest person I know. The bus pulled away while Jenny kept one hand inside her coat, clutching a USB like a treasured keepsake. They had escaped, at least for now, crossing the river. Back at the community center, the last of the masked intruders combed the basement but found no Jenny, no Emily, no USB. Only Marcus remained, seated in a metal chair with zip ties binding his wrists. Blood trickled from a wound on his temple, yet he smiled faintly through cracked lips as an agent barked into a radio. They're gone. The target has slipped. The man in charge stepped forward, a sharply dressed operative with a cold stare. You delayed them, he said. Marcus's smile broadened despite the pain. Because you are the rot. And now the world will sense it. The agent's jaw clenched as they dragged him away. 2 hours later, Jenny and Emily sat in a modest motel just outside Trenton. Quiet and inexpensive, cash only. Jenny paced nervously while holding a radio. In her hand, she switched to Channel 3, hearing nothing but static at first. Then, Marcus's voice came through faintly. Don't stop there. Keep moving east. You have 48 hours, before silence returned. Jenny lowered the radio with a slow motion, her fingers shaking not out of fear, but from a hard truth. They were no longer fleeing. Instead, they were walking directly into danger. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a notebook. Inside were notes filled with addresses and names from various files, alongside one final lead, Camille Booker. During the journey, she had decrypted one of the encrypted folders, and what she discovered went far beyond mere surveillance. It revealed manipulation of laws, bribery, and a classified memo outlining a projected policy rollout, named Echo Kid Phase 2, targeting more cities and more children. Jenny shut the notebook carefully. Emily was sketching on the motel's notepad, drawing stick figures holding hands beneath the sun with thick crayon rays. Emily tapped one figure, saying, That's you, then pointed to another. And who's that beside me? You, Emily, answered Jenny, wearing a faint smile. With armor. What type of armor? Emily asked. Jenny chuckled wearily. The truth kind of armor. But as sunlight pierced through the torn motel curtains, casting streaks of light inside, Jenny's expression grew grave once more. The conflict wasn't finished. It was only starting. The diner rested beside a cracked, neglected state highway, forgotten by time and preserved only because truckers still favored its bacon, cooked in grease over factory-prepared gas station snacks. Jenny and Emily sat in the back booth. The vinyl seats cracked and weathered. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of coffee and fried potatoes. In the corner, a lone jukebox hummed quietly, filling the silence with old tunes. In the corner, The buzzer sounded but did not sing. Emily played with the salt shaker, stacking napkins like small towers. Her crayon artwork lay carefully folded beside the last biscuit she was saving for Mr. Marcus. Jenny stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. She had not really slept. Her eyes flicked to the glass door every time it opened, half expecting men in dark suits or unmarked vehicles, yet all that entered were truck drivers in flannel shirts and elderly women with weary smiles. Across from them, Camille Booker arrived. She appeared different in person, more exhausted, more human. The thick glasses could not hide the burden she bore behind her eyes. She slid into the booth and greeted Emily with a soft nod. "Hi, sweetheart, I have heard you are quite courageous." Emma shyly smiled and returned to her drawing. Jenny reached into her coat and pulled out a USB drive. Camille took it with shaking hands and slipped it into a small, secure laptop. "Your email mentioned you decrypted one of the folders," Jenny said. "How severe is it?" Camille's jaw tightened. "It is systemic and coordinated. Echo Kid does not just address neglect. It is about control. They are constructing predictive behavior models on children, using school-issued tablets to monitor what they read, what they click on, how they respond to certain content, then labeling them and subtly guiding them into academic or disciplinary tracks." Jenny leaned forward. "You are saying they are programming kids before the children even understand who they are," she continued. "They call it guided futures. It is disguised as a support system, but the system is pushing Black and Hispanic children away from pathways filled with opportunity. It is wrapped in language about fairness, but the underlying algorithms label them as behavioral dangers based on their postal codes, family situations, and even how they speak." Jenny's hands gripped her mug tightly as she wondered how to prove this without sounding like someone who believes in conspiracies. "You cannot do that easily," she thought. "You reveal the software, the emails, the secret messages," she said. "I have enough evidence to create a stir, but not enough to withstand an attack aimed at discrediting me. We need witnesses, insiders willing to speak out." Her breath hitched when she added, "I know someone. Her name is Latrice Nolan. She was part of the pilot project. She is frightened but willing to talk." Emily nodded in agreement. "Then we must meet her tonight." At the far end of the booth, Emily suddenly asked, "Will this stop them from harming more children?" Both women fell into silence before Jenny finally answered, "It is a beginning." Later that night, they gathered with Latrice in a quiet corner of a Newark library. Latrice kept glancing nervously around, her eyes hollow, her fingers nervously twisting her purse strap. "I did not sign up for this," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "They told me it was a mentorship program. I believed in it until I saw the documents they never wanted anyone to find." Camille recorded her with a small microphone, careful to stay under the radar. "Explain the behavioral risk index," Latrice said. "They make it sound like science, but it is just coded racism. They labeled Emily as high risk because she drew monsters with red eyes and because she preferred to be quiet. That child is not broken. She is simply grieving," Jenny said quietly. Next to her, her face still pale, they signaled my sister Latrice, who nodded slowly. She was stationed on the observation level, where a quiet signal meant to monitor her progress and keep track of her, ready to intervene if necessary. Most parents never realize until it is too late. Camille asked if she could obtain the internal rubric and the criteria files. Latrice replied that she had been carrying a flash drive in her bra for weeks. "Paranoid, I suppose," she added. "No," Jenny corrected, "just clever." Latrice handed the small black device to Camille, saying that it contained everything she could gather without triggering the security system, but warned that they needed to act quickly as authorities were cracking down harshly on whistleblowers. Camille glanced at the two women. "We go public in 72 hours. I have contacts in the media, but once this is exposed, it will be war. They will target anyone linked to this." Jenny looked over at Emily, who was curled up on a beanbag in the corner of the room, holding a children's book she could not read, her eyes scanning the pages as if searching for something familiar. "I am not running anymore," Jenny declared. "We finished this." Back at the motel after midnight, Jenny lay awake on the coarse bedspread, watching moonlight filter through torn blinds. Emma slept beside her, her breath soft and steady, one hand still clutching the corner of her drawing. Camille was busy at her laptop, her fingers flying. The files Latrice had given them were more than just internal memos. They included communications between city officials, corporate sponsors, and political strategists, the financial forces behind Echo Kid. The program originated from an educational project called Future Now Pack, linked to national candidates. This is more than just a school system, Camille said quietly. It serves as a blueprint for the next 2 decades. Jenny sat up. So if we halt it here, we halt it everywhere, Camille concluded. There was a prolonged pause. Then Jenny inquired, "Do you trust in justice?" Camille did not raise her eyes. "I used to trust in exposure. Now I trust in consequences." Jenny agreed. "Then let us bring about both." She withdrew Emily's drawing from her coat pocket and spread it on the bed cover. It was the one she had folded with such care, the one depicting her as truth armor. For a moment, all anxiety vanished, replaced by determination. Tomorrow they would start the actual battle, not in hiding, but in the daylight, with identities, with evidence. And a young girl who had seen far too much, yet continued to believe in heroes. That was their advantage. The truth was not simply information, it was Emily. The system attempted to erase her, but she remained silently courageous, with her $2 dreams and her fearsome crayons. And they had underestimated her. Tomorrow the world would recognize her name. The morning breeze in Camden carried a heavy silence, one of those uncommon quiet moments that arrive just before a shift. Jenny, Camille, and Latrice were seated in the cramped rear room of a local AM radio station, a place that still broadcast gospel at dawn and accepted neighborhood reports about potholes and prayer gatherings. The station manager, a man in his 60s named Rufus Tate, had once. Ethan had marched alongside the sanitation workers in Memphis, his dedication to honesty etched into the lines on his hands and in the sermon-like tone he used when speaking. Emily stood by the window as Rufus completed his final check of the microphone levels. "Do you realize the danger involved?" he asked without glancing up. "We do," Kimmy replied firmly. "I mean it," he added, turning to face them directly. "They will target your jobs, your families, perhaps even worse. But if what you have brought me is true, this is not simply a local scandal. It is a moment of reckoning." Jenny looked over at Emily, who sat silently in the corner, clutching a folded piece of paper. It was the drawing once more, and this time Emily had included 3 figures standing behind the little girl. One wore armor, another was a tall woman with glasses looking exhausted, a sister who seemed worn down, and a woman with curly hair wielding a microphone almost like a weapon. Jenny inhaled deeply. "We go live at exactly 8:03 in the morning." The radio crackled as Rufus Tate's recognizable voice filled the airwaves. "Good morning, Camden. This is Rufus Tate, and today's broadcast will be unlike any other. We are pulling back the veil." He introduced the guests simply by their first names. Emily began speaking, her tone steady and purposeful. Supported by solid evidence, she described how the program called Echo Kid appeared as academic aid, but was actually tracking at-risk children, particularly black and brown kids, using predictive algorithms. Then Latrice shared her personal experience, how she had been deceived and threatened, how she witnessed capable teachers being driven away when they inquired how Emily, a grieving child, became labeled as a risk, not because of misbehavior, but because she was quiet and did not smile enough. Calls began flooding the line. A retired educator from Trenton, a mother in Philadelphia who questioned why her son suddenly lost access to college preparation, and a pastor whose after-school program was defunded following a visit from unidentified district officials, all voiced their grief and anger. One story after another emerged, creating a picture of injustice that could no longer be ignored. Then came a surprising moment. "Would you like to speak, Emily?" Rufus asked softly, lowering the microphone toward her. Emma glanced at Jenny, hesitant. Jenny crouched beside her. "You don't have to, but if you want to, they will listen to you." Emily slowly nodded and climbed into the chair. The microphone seemed almost too large for her small frame. "My name is Emily Wilson," she said quietly. "I miss my mom. I don't understand why people think I'm bad because I don't talk much. But I see things and I draw what I feel. I want to be someone who helps others. That is all." Silence fell on the line. Then the station's phone rang again. This time, it was not a caller, but a reporter from a local news outlet requesting an interview. Another call came through, an attorney from Newark offering legal assistance to Latrice and the others. Then, yet another call, an anonymous whistleblower from inside the school board who said, "Check folder 11B. There is more." Ethan's eyes grew wide as we had just ignited the spark. Hours later, social media erupted. The story was clipped, subtitled, and circulated by prominent education advocacy groups. The hashtag number Echo It Exposed climbed the national trending list by mid-afternoon. Rufus's former station, usually ignored, had become the heart of a media storm. By sunset, Ethan's inbox overflowed. A junior developer from the program software team sent code files revealing how racial and economic data were manipulated to influence student opportunities. An editor from a leading newspaper wanted to publish a front-page investigation. But amidst the turmoil, Jenny remained composed. She took Emily for ice cream at the corner store. For the first time in a long time, they sat by the window and laughed. Not because things were resolved, but because they had stopped concealing the truth. "I heard what you said on the radio," Jenny said while licking her cone. Emily glanced up. "Did I do well?" "You did more than well, kiddo," Jenny smiled. "You showed everyone the truth." They walked back as the streetlights flickered on, cars rolled by quietly, and strangers nodded in acknowledgement. Something unspoken had transformed. People now recognized them not merely as another struggling family, but as part of a larger movement. Approaching the motel, Ethan caught up with them, phone in hand. "We need to talk," he said. "What is it?" Jenny asked. Ethan turned the screen toward them. A news alert from a national network announced a breaking story. A major education company had released a statement denying all accusations. An internal investigation was initiated. "They are afraid," Camille mentioned. Jenny glanced at Emily, who returned the look with a quiet intensity in her eyes. "Good," Jenny responded. "Let them remain distant." Thunder rumbled slowly and deeply. A summer storm was approaching, but for the first time, Jenny felt prepared for it. She reached out and grasped Emily's hand, squeezing it gently. "We are no longer just enduring. We are rewriting the narrative," she thought, genuinely believing in it for the very first time in her life. That night, the rain fell heavily, tapping persistently against the motel windows like a rhythmic knocking. Jenny sat at the bed's edge, her arms wrapped around Emily, watching thunderclouds roll across the television screen. On the floor, Camille had unfolded a folder labeled 11B, the very one mentioned by the anonymous tip. Inside were documents that were truly incriminating: memos, flagged reports, and handwritten notes from district leaders. Most alarming were the spreadsheets from predictive models containing lists of children, ages 6 to 12, ranked by expected deviation. Beside many names was the code DNR, meaning "Do Not Recommend." Camille whispered, her voice trembling. "They are using this to exclude kids from opportunities, not only from scholarships or gifted programs. This is systemic exclusion." Latrice bent over to read silently, her expression growing grimmer. "And it gets worse," she said. "Look at these field agent notes. They have been observing families and recording details. One entry reads, 'Parent works multiple jobs. Child likely unsupervised during the week. Potential liability.'" Jenny's jaw clenched as she said, "They are treating these children like problems to be removed in the future." Camille jumped in, "And they are concealing it behind phrases like early intervention and community safety." Suddenly, Emily stood up and moved toward the window, still holding the folder. "Huh, there is something more." "What is it, sweetheart?" Jenny asked. Emily pointed at a photograph clipped to one of the reports. "I have seen that man before." It was a blurry image of a well-dressed black man in a charcoal suit shaking hands with the superintendent. "That is Martin Kellogg," Camille responded. "He is the technology consultant who assisted with launching Echo Kid. He has always presented himself as a reformer." Emily frowned. "He came to my school once. I saw him talk to the principal, and he looked at me as though he already knew something, like I was merely a statistic to him." Jenny stepped closer to Camille and asked, "Where is he now?" "He is based in Washington, runs a think tank. But I've heard that he is preparing to announce a new education program. Probably just a rebranding of the same old thing." Latrice folded her arms firmly. We cannot let him slip away with this. The next morning, they drove to Trenton without speaking. Rufus had connected them with a civil rights lawyer named Lionel Hart, an elderly but sharply intelligent attorney known for exposing corrupt housing officials in Newark during the 1990s. He agreed to meet them in person at a diner he had owned for 3 decades called Juneberry's, famous for its biscuits. The work was still done manually, and coffee kept flowing continuously. Ethan examined the documents, his eyes squinting behind thick glasses. He realized this issue went beyond a mere lawsuit. It was a systemic attack on children disguised as protection. If we expose this publicly, there will be backlash. They will twist the story, claiming it stems from parental neglect or educator prejudice. Jenny remained steady. Then, we must prevent them from speaking first. Ethan agreed and said they would file an injunction to halt all associated programs across the state. But that alone wouldn't be sufficient. We require a human face, a narrative that cannot be reduced to statistics. Emily met his gaze. She has already done that. Ethan smiled softly. Then we handle this on our terms. He placed a worn business card on the desk. This man owes me a favor. He is a producer for a public affairs show, airing Sunday mornings, with national audience. If we manage this carefully, the entire nation can see the truth. Later that evening, everyone gathered in Ethan's office, preparing for the televised interview. The production crew was set to arrive early next morning. Emily reviewed the key messages, Latrice combed through the timelines, and Jenny assisted Emma in selecting an outfit. A modest navy dress with white buttons and a soft collar. As Emma remained still, Jenny tenderly smoothed her curls. "You are about to be on television, sweetheart. Are you all right?" Emily nodded. "Can I show them my drawing?" Jenny hesitated briefly. "You want to bring it? I want people to understand what I see." Jenny smiled, tears welling but not falling. "Then you show them." Meanwhile, Ethan stood alone in the corridor with Lionel. "She is just a child," Ethan said. "She should not have to bear this burden." Lionel responded, "She is not carrying it by herself." The truth is that when grown-ups fail, it is the children who always suffer the consequences. Ethan nodded quietly and then whispered, "There is something I have not shared with them. That folder mentions a new testing location for the updated system scheduled to launch in 2 weeks in a town similar to this one." Lionel's face grew serious. "Then we stop it before it even begins." By early morning, the film crew had arrived and started setting up inside the diner. June shone brightly like a shrine of defiance beneath the hanging lights and portraits of local heroes. Emma sat across from the interviewer, her feet swinging above the floor. He leaned closer, speaking softly. "Can you tell me what you experience when you create art?" Emma lifted her drawing, a young girl in armor standing proudly. Behind her, more figures appeared. Her sister Ethan, Jenny, Latrice, Rufus, and even Lionel. Their expressions were tired but courageous. "I create because sometimes words fail," Emily said. "But pictures can make people feel, and I want them to understand what we went through." The host turned towards the camera, deeply moved. "There are moments when a country must choose the future it wants to build. Today, a little girl reminds us what is truly worth fighting for." In that instant, across kitchen tables and quiet living rooms everywhere, school cafeterias and courtrooms echoed with Emma's voice, and the battle for justice started to feel like it possessed genuine momentum. The consequences began swiftly. The morning following Emma's televised interview, Jenny's phone became nonstop with calls. Before daybreak, journalists, whistleblowers, and even some cautious school employees reached out, confirming what the documents had suggested. This was not an isolated local incident, but a coordinated national operation. Concealed beneath bureaucratic jargon and digital secrecy, Camille stood in front of the motel's old window air conditioner, phone pressed to her ear, speaking with a representative from a parents' coalition in Alabama. "Yes," she said softly but urgently. "We have names, we have timestamps. If you have records as well, then this is larger than we imagined." Latrice leaned against the wall while watching the local news replay Emily Wilson's segment for the third time. The anchor's attitude had shifted from disbelief to anger. A third grader was labeled a behavioral threat, simply because she cried after lunch, and parents were demanding accountability from Echo Kid and the state education department. Jenny opened her laptop, bombarded with emails. One subject line stopped her cold. "We need to talk before they find out I spoke." It came from an unfamiliar address, but the signature was Martin Kellogg. Her stomach knotted as she opened the message, which was brief. "I never intended for this to happen. I had no idea what they would do with the data. Meet me tonight alone. Newark, 11:30 at night, parking lot behind the old community center. I will bring everything." Camille frowned when Jenny revealed it was a trap. Maybe," Jenny answered. "But what if it is not?" Ethan was the only one who did not reject the idea immediately. "Let me make a few calls. If he is serious, we will be there with backup." Quiet backup. That evening, the parking lot behind the community center was illuminated only by the orange glow of a single flickering streetlight. The building itself had been deserted for a long time, windows covered with boards, graffiti peeling away from the walls. Jenny arrived with Camille and Ethan parked 1 block away watching from an unmarked car with tinted windows. Rufus sat in the back seat, phone in hand, eyes alert. Kel appeared from the shadows, wearing a tan coat and wire-rimmed glasses. His face looked pale, his movements restless. "You came alone?" he asked, eyes scanning the darkness. Jenny did not respond, simply crossed her arms. "Speak." He handed her a flash drive and a sealed envelope. It began as a research device, predictive modeling for early intervention, that was all. But then the department got involved, then contractors. They started manipulating outcomes, excluding variables. You understand what I mean? They crafted the model to target black and brown children quietly and indirectly. Jenny's hands tightened around the envelope. "And you just stood by and watched?" "I tried to intervene," Kel muttered, "but I had signed too many non-disclosure agreements. My name was everywhere on it. I could not stop it, only slow down its launch. That is why they are rushing now, because the opportunity is closing, and we need to force it wide open." Ethan nodded silently. That envelope contains a signed internal directive, proof that the state was aware, and that they authorized the funding suddenly. In the distance, a car door slammed loudly. Ethan snapped, "They are watching me! I must leave!" Before Jenny could ask anything more, he vanished into the shadows. 2 days later, the courtroom was crowded. Lionel had acted quickly, submitting a federal injunction, supported by the contents of the flash drives and the directive inside the envelope. Camille prepared a detailed 78-page brief connecting the design of the algorithm to discrimination based on race. Rufus managed security and the media, while Emily, quiet but steady, sat with her drawing resting on her lap. When the judge, a sharp-eyed black woman named Evelyn Granger, took her seat, silence fell. Camille presented the argument with clarity and a steady rhythm. "We are not here to guess intent. We are here to demonstrate impact. The evidence reveals targeted harm disguised as progress and exposes a systemic failure maintained by institutions responsible for children's futures." Judge Granger surveyed the room. Where was the child at the center of this case? Emily stood for a moment as the room fell silent, holding her drawing gently in both hands. Lionel gave her an encouraging nod. She turned toward the judge and said, "My name is Emily Wilson. I used to believe the school environment felt secure, but then they claimed I was too quiet, too inquisitive, too unlike the others, and suddenly I was excluded from everything." Judge Granger leaned in and asked, "Why do you believe that occurred?" I replied, "Because someone informed a computer about who I was before I had the chance to reveal myself." The judge exhaled deeply and said, "Thank you, Emily." The decision was announced 3 days afterwards. A temporary halt on all Echo Kid deployments across the state, a request for executive testimony, and most importantly, a court order requiring the release of anonymized algorithm data for public examination. Outside the courthouse, a crowd gathered. Parents, educators, and journalists stood in the cool afternoon breeze waiting. Jenny appeared with Emma beside her, flashes from cameras lighting up the scene. Someone shouted, "What do you say to those who labeled this a hoax?" Jenny calmly met the camera's gaze and answered, "Justice doesn't shout at first, but when it finally speaks, there is no doubt." Emma gently tugged on her coat and asked, "Can I say something as well?" Jenny stepped back and Emma faced the crowd saying, "I'm no longer afraid because now people acknowledge me. and I hope they recognize others too. There was a brief silence before applause broke out. It was not overwhelming yet, but it was genuine, and for the first time it was loud enough to pierce the silence that had tried so hard to hold firm. The days following the court injunction were a whirlwind, filled with emails, media attention, and guarded optimism. Jenny scarcely had a moment to breathe as events unfolded rapidly. Ethan had rested while Camille was laid to rest, as they prepared legal arguments for what was certain to become a lengthy fight. Yet, amid the disorder, something shifted. People at last started paying attention. On a dull Thursday morning, just as the sky began to turn a shimmering silver before dawn, Emily sat at the kitchen table in their modest apartment with a battered spiral notebook open before her. She was not sketching today, but writing instead. Latrice leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, observing her with quiet intent. "Are you working on another story, baby?" Emily nodded gently. "It is a letter to my father, but I think I will give it to Mr. Ellison instead." Latrice's breath caught, and she remained silent for a long moment before softly saying, "Take your time." Later that day, while Camille and Jenny met with a documentary crew interested in the case, Emily entered the bakery by herself. She wore a gentle lavender sweater and had her curly hair neatly tied in a ponytail. The air was filled with the scent of warm sourdough and sweet apple cinnamon. Grant Ellison stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled up and hands lightly dusted with flour. When he noticed Emily, he quickly wiped his palms on a towel and smiled warmly. "Hello there, sweetheart. What can I get for you today?" Emily stepped forward but did not order anything. Instead, she reached into her pocket and offered a folded envelope with her name carefully penned on the front. "This is for you." Grant looked puzzled but accepted the letter, their eyes meeting. "Should I read it now?" She nodded quietly as he gently unfolded the paper, his fingers trembling faintly despite his efforts to conceal it while he started to read. The kitchen noises gradually disappeared, and Emily's handwriting appeared careful yet slightly uneven in places, but the message was clearly hers. "Dear Mr. Ellison, I realize I do not have a father, and that is all right. Many children don't. But if I had the choice, I would want him to be like you. Not because you gave me muffins or poured me juice, but because you listened when nobody else did. You never asked me to be smaller or quieter. You truly saw me. So I want you to understand that even if no one else tells you, you're already someone's hero. You are mine. Love, Emily." When he reached the end, Grant's eyes shimmered with tears. He did not attempt to wipe them away, but simply knelt before her and softly said, "Thank you. I will cherish this always." She hugged him tightly, a kind of embrace carrying emotions that words could not express. That evening, Jenny, Camille, and Lionel gathered around the modest dinner table in Latrice's apartment. A warm chicken casserole steamed in the center, while Lionel passed around bowls of fresh corn salad. Rufus, surprisingly skilled in the kitchen, had prepared sweet potato pie. For the first time in many weeks, the atmosphere felt like family. They laughed about Lionel's awful parking, teased Rufus for being too quiet near Emily, and swapped old stories. Latrice shared memories of her childhood back in Mississippi, with porch swings, jazz music spinning on records, and sweet tea brewed so strong it could almost hurt your teeth. As Emily gently patted, dressed in her pajamas, everyone grew silent. She settled onto Jenny's lap, resting her head gently on her shoulder. "I really like this," she whispered softly. "All of us here together." Emily smiled warmly, her eyes full of tenderness. "Me too, kiddo." After a moment of quiet reflection, Jenny spoke up. "I've been thinking maybe we should do more than just battle this in court. Perhaps we take it to Congress, create a real uproar." Lionel raised an eyebrow and asked, "Are you prepared for that kind of storm?" Jenny glanced at Emily and said, "She deserves it." Everyone nodded in agreement. 2 months later, Grant stood behind a podium in Washington, D.C., flanked by Emily and Jenny. Before them sat a bipartisan committee responsible for overseeing educational technology. The atmosphere was charged, yet respectful. Although Emily was not present, her letter had been officially entered into the congressional record. Clearing his throat, Grant began, "I am not a lawyer nor a policymaker. I run a bakery. But what happened to Emily and so many other children happened under my watch too. Because I was not paying attention, because I did not understand. But now I do. And if this nation still stands for the values I hold dear, we must not allow algorithms to determine a child's future before a teacher even meets them. Behind him, screens showed anonymized data revealing exclusion patterns, disproportionately high suspension rates, predictive alerts based on neighborhoods, and vague behavior notes such as too quiet or often daydreaming. Emily stepped forward. Justice, she said, is not only about courtrooms. It is about correcting the course we take. There was a silence afterward, deep and reflective, the kind that signals something significant has changed. Back at home, Emily and Latrice were watching the news on a secondhand television. Emily was cozy under a blanket, clutching her favorite teddy bear close to her chin, when Ethan's voice came through the speakers. She smiled softly and said, "He's not afraid anymore." Latrice gently brushed a curl off her forehead and replied, "No, sweetheart, none of us are." Weeks went by. New laws were introduced, schools revised contracts, and the algorithm was dismantled in its present form. A national committee was established to ensure fairness in educational technology. Yet for Emily, the biggest shift was quieter. At school, her name no longer paused teachers. Her grades were no longer questioned, and her curiosity was finally welcomed. She was just Emily, a girl fascinated by space who sketched stars, and once wished for a father but ended up with something far greater, a community standing behind her voice. One evening, as the sunset painted the sky gold and pink outside her window, she opened her notebook and began crafting a new story. This time it was about being heard, not invisible. 3 months after the congressional hearing, life at the Wilson home had settled into a steady rhythm, almost peaceful. Emily was excelling in school and had been accepted into an advanced program that allowed her to truly explore space science, not just dream about it. Latrice had finally taken on a permanent position as an administrator at the local senior center, embracing a new chapter of her own. Jenny had gone back to her private practice, yet she kept a single photograph of Emily on her desk as a constant reminder of her reasons to fight. However, peace for people like them was seldom lasting. It all began with a letter. A white envelope addressed to the legal guardians of Emily Wilson appeared. There was no return address, and the handwriting was precise, almost too perfect. Camille opened it that afternoon at the dining table, while Emily rested on the sofa, with a copy of Hidden Figures slipping from her hands. Camille's eyes quickly swept the contents, her face growing tense. "What is it?" Latrice asked, drying her hands on a dish towel. Camille handed her the letter. Someone was petitioning for legal custody of Emily, and it was not a stranger. Latrice read quietly, her lips pressed together before murmuring a single name, Pearl. Pearl Holloway, Emily's birth mother. A name spoken only once since the night Emily had appeared on Latrice's doorstep 6 years earlier. She had disappeared after leaving Emma at a shelter, leaving nothing but a worn blanket and an intake form filled with barely readable details. No one had heard from her until now. The letter revealed that Pearl had gotten her life in order, was employed steadily, and sought reunification with her daughter. The letter was signed by a lawyer from a firm that specialized in family law cases concerning reunification, intriguingly funded by an anonymous benefactor. Camille's thoughts immediately shifted to the worst possibility. "Someone is supporting her," she whispered. "This didn't happen out of nowhere. A maternal revelation unfolds, and it revolves around leverage." Jenny arrived an hour later carrying a printed file. "You were correct," she told Emily, the attorney representing Pearl, who also took on cases for biotech contractors, including former associates of Ardent. "It seems someone is attempting to involve Emily in a complex, drawn-out scheme by way of custody battles, but she—" Emily Latrice whispered that her disappearance was not merely due to hardship. She vanished without a trace. Who just vanishes and then returns like that? Jenny's voice was hushed. People with influential backing those who aim to control the story. They did not inform Emily immediately, waiting instead to grasp what the court session would entail. But children can detect when something changes, even when adults remain silent. That Sunday, Emily pushed her scrambled eggs about on her plate, hardly touching them. Eventually, she asked, "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart," Latrice responded, taking her hand. "Then why is everyone whispering?" Camille inquired Bata, Do you recall your birth mother, Pearl? Emily hesitated, furrowing her brow slightly, her hair scented of cinnamon. She used to hum while tidying. Camille said softly, "She has requested to see you again. She wants to return." Emily stayed quiet for a long moment before looking up. But why now? There was no satisfying explanation. The first session in family court was private, attended only by the judge, the lawyers, and Pearl, who wore a modest dress with a pearl necklace as if to gain sympathy. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. She did not direct her gaze at Latrice. Instead, she looked at Emily only once when the judge, a man with white hair named Merrick, posed questions with precise detachment. "Ms. Holloway, have you maintained contact with your child during your absence?" he inquired. "No," Pearl confessed, her tone steady, "but I have been striving to become someone she can be proud of." Emily's representative did not contest this, but presented documents, reports from Emma's teachers, counselors, and healthcare providers, all illustrating a picture of a child who was stable and flourishing, whose wounds had begun to heal. Then she introduced a final item, a letter from Emma to Mr. Ellison. Camille explained it might not count as formal testimony, but it was the truest expression of where Emma felt safety, love, and identity. Pearl's lawyer objected, but the judge dismissed the objection, allowing the letter to remain on the record. Outside the courtroom, Emily sat on a bench with Jenny, while the others spoke privately with the judge. She held her favorite book, Still Hidden Figures, but did not open it. "Do I have to live with her?" she asked softly. "No one will force you to do anything against your will," Jenny responded, her voice gentle yet resolute. "The judge will consider what is best for you." "But what if she has changed for the better?" Emily wondered aloud. "If she truly wants to have you back, then we will discuss it as a team. Being better does not erase past harm, and simply being your parent does not guarantee she will reclaim your heart. You have the right to choose who deserves it." Emily nodded slowly, then almost quietly Ethan leaned against Jenny's side and murmured, "I have already made up my mind." A few days later, an unexpected event occurred. Grant Ellison received a subpoena. He arrived at the courtroom dressed in his usual soft-washed flannel shirt and black pants, clearly out of place among the formal suits, but carrying an undeniable aura. "I am not here as her guardian," he stated to the judge, "but because Emily trusted me, and because I witnessed firsthand what this family has created around her." He paused, then added, "If Pearl wants to mend her relationship with Emily, that is fine, but it must not come at the expense of tearing apart her life. She is not a pawn. She is a person, and she knows where she belongs." The judge ended the session without delivering a verdict, but as the gavel came down, Camille leaned toward Pearl's lawyer and calmly said, "We will resolve this quietly, or bring it into the spotlight, and you understand what that means for your supporters." The caution struck like a sudden storm. Outside in the dimming sunlight, Emily stood on the courthouse steps, holding Latrice's hand. "Do I have to see her again?" she asked. Latrice glanced downward and replied, "Only if you want to, darling, and not before you are ready." Emily was silent for a moment, then nodded. Maybe someday, but not today. But she turned toward the parking lot where Jenny was waiting with the car running. As they walked, Camille whispered, "Our battle is far from over." Latrice agreed, "Good, because they are not finished coming after us." The next morning following the hearing, Camille sat alone in the kitchen. The steam rising from her coffee twisted in the chilly air, and the quietness of the house, usually so rare, did not feel calm today as it normally did. Dense Latrice had taken Emily to school early, aiming to maintain their routine as close to usual as possible. But Camille was aware that normality was now just a fantasy. Pearl's return had ignited something far bigger than a custody battle. It had stirred old memories. Her phone buzzed softly against the table with a message from Grant saying, "You should stop by the gallery. There is something important for you to see." The art gallery remained tranquil as ever since Grant liked it that way, by appointment only. Gentle jazz played in the background, and the subdued lighting made every artwork appear like a hidden secret. Camille entered and shut the door behind her. At the far end, Grant held a familiar frame in his hands. He explained, "I took it down this morning," gesturing toward the wall, sensing that something felt unusual. He flipped the frame around. A sealed manila envelope was taped to the back. Camille narrowed her eyes. I did not put this there, he added firmly. She carefully peeled the tape and opened the folder. Inside was a bundle of typed papers, their edges slightly yellowed, with a flash drive clipped to the top. The heading on the first page read, Ardent Internal Security File Project Northbeam. Looking up, she whispered, Where did this come from? Grant shook his head, saying, That painting was included in a batch I purchased 2 months ago. Just when Pearl began poking around Chemmy's, the pulse quickened. Someone had been placing evidence right before our eyes, or shielding it, Grant whispered softly. They sat inside the gallery office and connected the drive. A collection of files appeared, including laboratory logs, payment records, and transcripts. Emily clicked through, heart racing. The further she explored, the more it became clear. Project Northbeam was far more than just a research program. It was a carefully controlled experiment, and Emily's sister, Amari, had been involved. In one report, a research assistant described a child participant displaying an accelerated cognitive reaction to chemical sequences, reaching more than 3 times the control group's average. That child's code, NB7A, matched exactly Amari's known file identifier from the Foundation's leaked documents. Emily leaned back, eyes burning with realization. They had not only observed her, they had experimented on her. That evening, Emily summoned Jenny and Latrice to the study. The folder rested between them on the table. This is it, Emily said. The leverage they have been holding. Pearl did not simply abandon Emily. She relinquished custody under duress because they threatened to reveal what had been done to Amari. Jenny examined the pages, each one more unsettling than the last. This exceeds the scope of a civil case. It is federal. If this becomes public, Latrice interrupted, Emily will become a target again. Emily nodded. That is why we must control how this comes out, not react to it. Jenny crossed her arms. Do you trust Grant? Emily hesitated, then replied, Yes. I believe he was unaware, but someone exploited the situation. Someone from inside must have dropped this gallery into our hands. Latrice's voice remained calm. Then we have to locate them. Later that evening, Camille discovered Emily sitting on the back porch, her hoodie zipped tightly up to her chin despite the spring air. She held a flashlight with one hand and was drawing constellations in a notebook. Couldn't sleep, Camille asked. Emily shrugged, mentioning a dream about Amari Camilla at Basilia. She described a room flooded with white light, similar to hospital rooms, and she wore her braids in the purple ones Emily had always wanted. She said something. What did she say? Don't let them write our story, write your own, Emily recalled. Camille's chest tightened. You know, I believe that's exactly what she would say. Emily looked up. Is that folder about her? Camille blinked. What makes you say that? I saw it on your desk and noticed your expression when you read it. Camille reached for Emily's hand. Yes, it is, and I promise we will make sure she is remembered properly. Emily squeezed her hand. Then, I want to help you already. The next morning, Jenny set up a confidential meeting with an old contact, Avi Stern, a retired NSA investigator turned whistleblower advisor. They met at a small diner along Route 9, away from town and unnoticed. Avi examined the documents carefully and nodded slowly. If what's here is genuine, you're holding a scandal that could bring down more than one company, possibly even parts of the Department of Defense. Camille leaned forward. We are not aiming for a nuclear fallout. We want control and protection. For Emily and justice for Amari. Ethan nodded, then said, We must confirm the chain of custody and verify the data to build a solid case step by step. He pulled out a disposable phone and wrote a number on a napkin, instructing to contact this man, who used to work as a forensic data analyst at the CDC. He will be able to tell if it is genuine. But once you ignite the fuse, there is no turning back. Camille slipped the napkin into her pocket. We already ignited it the moment Pearl came back inside. Back at home, Latrice found Emily curled up in the reading corner, holding her sketchbook open to a drawing of 2 girls, holding hands beneath a dark sky. One had long braids, and the other was holding a flashlight shining above them. Written in elegant cursive were the words, We do not flee from shadows, we carry the light. Basila, you are not scared, are you? Emily glanced up and answered, I am not the one who should be scared. With that, a change took place not only in their home, but in the balance of power. For the first time, they were not simply reacting but actively preparing because someone had attempted to bury the past, but Emily Wilson and the women who cared for her were determined to dig it all up. The old storage building stood like a forgotten monument on the edge of town, nestled between rusty railroad tracks and a closed tire repair shop. Its corrugated metal walls were dulled by years of dirt, and a leaning chain-link fence barely secured the entrance. At a casual glance, no one would guess it once belonged to Ardon's research unit. Camille parked the car, cloaked under the shadow of an elm tree nearby. Sitting in the passenger seat, Jenny zipped her windbreaker all the way up to her chin and asked, "Are you certain about this?" Emily did not respond immediately. Her gaze stayed locked on the building. The address was listed in the folder, and if the files were correct that Amari had been taken there, they had to investigate. There was no room for guessing anymore. Jenny nodded silently and slid her phone into her boot. "All right, let's go inside." The air inside was heavy with the scent of mildew and rusted metal. The beams from their flashlights carved through the dust like ribbons of vapor. Rows of metal shelves supported a jumble of scattered debris: old laboratory boxes, cracked monitors, and a child's plastic chair flipped upside down. Emily paused beside a locked filing cabinet, its combination taped crudely to the side as if someone deliberately wanted it to be found. She twisted the dial, and the door opened with a low creak. Jenny appeared over her shoulder just as Emily pulled out a thin binder marked NB Trials Terminated Subjects. Her hands trembled as she opened it. There it was, subject NB-17, identified as Amari Wilson. Attached to the top was a photo of a girl with long braids and tired eyes. Alongside it were medical records, test summaries, and behavior reports. "She was here," Emily whispered softly. Jenny exhaled shakily. Someone had left this for them to discover. Emily flipped through the pages until she uncovered a handwritten note hidden at the very back. It read the trials had been stopped, but the surveillance continued. It mentioned the name T. Holloway and said that is where everything begins. Emily felt a chill rush through her veins. She felt a chill as she recognized that name from a memo Grant had once framed in the gallery's rear room, dating back to the early days of the Ardent Foundation. Holloway had been mentioned as an executive overseer. That same evening, back at Camille's house, the women spread the binder's contents across the dining table. Latrice examined the note intently. "That's not merely a name. It signifies a gatekeeper." "Then we head to the gate," Jenny declared. Camille's eyes fixed on the name, her lips pressing tightly together. "We won't just knock. We'll tear it off its hinges." 2 days later, Camille arranged to meet Grant at a quiet cafe outside the city. The place had low ceilings, soft lighting, and shelves crammed with used books. She took a seat in a corner booth as Grant slid in opposite her, carrying a manila envelope. "You were correct," he said as he placed it on the table. "I tracked every transaction linked to that art lot." Holloway's name showed up on 2 pieces, both bought under shell companies. One of those was the painting with the folder. Camille opened the envelope and scanned the papers. "Now, why go through art?" "Art doesn't leave digital footprints," Grant explained. "It's an old money laundering tactic. Someone wanted to conceal something valuable without drawing attention." Camille looked up. "What else can you tell me about Holloway?" Grant leaned back, his expression strained. "He vanished from public sight 8 years ago. Rumors claimed he shifted to private sector security consulting, handling international contracts. But I discovered something more." He slid his phone across the table. The screen displayed a photo of a man in his 60s, wearing a military-grade parka as he stepped out of a black SUV. The image was recent, taken just a week earlier outside a secure facility in Arlington. Emily immediately recognized the building as federal property. "He is still under protection," she whispered, adding that the man remained dangerous. Grant chimed in. "If you go after him, you will not be the only one keeping an eye on him." Emily carefully put the photo away and said, "It is time we make ourselves visible." That evening, Emily came home from school holding a folded piece of construction paper, which she silently handed to Emily. On the front, in large letters, it read, "My sister is a star." Inside was a hand-drawn picture of Amari, with wings and a glowing heart. Beside her stood Emily, holding a small lantern, and underneath was a note that said, "I miss you. Even though I never met you, I will never forget you. Your light shines within me." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She knelt down and hugged Emily tightly. "You are the bravest little girl I have ever known," she said softly. Emma leaned against her and asked, "We are not afraid of bad people, right?" Emily kissed her forehead and said, "Not even a little." Later that night, Jenny's contact, Avi, returned the call. "I found Holloway's current alias," he reported. "He goes by Thomas Ellis and now works in a restricted section of a biotech think tank. But the most surprising part is that he still holds a security clearance." Emily's voice lowered. "So he is still connected?" she asked. Avi nodded. "More than connected. He is still pulling the strings behind the scenes. If he discovers you're investigating, you will need more than proof. You will require protection." Camille glanced out the window where Emily's flashlight sketch still remained pinned to the refrigerator. "We are not retreating," she declared. There was a brief silence on the line then. "Allow me to make a few calls," came the response before the phone disconnected. Camille faced Jenny and Latrice. "Tomorrow," she stated, "we travel to Arlington not simply to challenge a man, but to reveal an entire system." The morning air in Arlington had a sharpness that cut through Camille's anxiety like a surgical blade. As the black rental SUV moved smoothly past the Capitol's distant dome, she sat between Jenny and Latrice in the back seat, reviewing their strategy once again. Jenny had arranged visitor passes via a contact who owed her several favors. The badge worn by Camille bore the name Dr. Helena Ray, a false identity linked to a think tank supposedly conducting environmental health reviews. Latrice held a briefcase brimming with decoy papers, filled with technical terminology layered over authentic data on Ardon's initial trial subjects. Just enough to spark curiosity without triggering suspicion. This only works if we enter as if we belong here," said Jenny, while applying a last touch of mascara using the sun visor mirror. "Confidence is our shield," she added. "A shield is useless if we walk into a field of mines," Latrice whispered. She was right. The biotech facility resembled a private university campus, more than a security-heavy think tank, with brushed aluminum signs shining in the sunlight. Minimalist glass facades accompanied by carefully trimmed greenery bordered the wide stone pathway leading toward the main building within. Soft jazz music floated through the air in the lobby, amplifying the surreal feeling of tension. A receptionist dressed in a stylish navy uniform welcomed them with a smile. "Appointment with Director Ellis?" "Yes," Camille responded smoothly, her voice composed. "Emily Wilson from the Environmental Review Division." The woman glanced at her tablet before nodding. "You will be waiting in Conference Room B on the 3rd floor. Security will escort you." As the elevator ascended, Camille caught a glimpse of herself in the mirrored walls. Her reflection appeared calm, yet every muscle throbbed with restrained anger. They entered a stark conference room enclosed by glass walls, offering an extensive view of Arlington's skyline. Dominating the room was a long, polished table. Soon a man stepped in, Thomas Holloway, or rather Thomas Ellis. He wore a charcoal suit that seemed like a protective shell, and carried himself with silent command reserved for someone confident in his immunity. His silver hair was trimmed in a military style, and his face revealed no emotion. "You must be Dr. Ray," he said, extending a firm handshake. Camille accepted it. "And you must be Director Ellis." They took their seats. Jenny placed a briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "We are conducting a comprehensive cross-institutional audit concerning legacy health trials, specifically focusing on data retention policies. Your name appeared in several oversight documents." Holloway remained unfazed. "Old shadows," he remarked dryly. A smile appeared as Latrice said, "I have overseen a few intense programs during my career, but always with complete legal approval naturally." She placed a printed document on the table. Amari's file was partially obscured, just enough to seem clinical. This case file had not been kept according to national storage rules. "Do you realize what that means?" Holloway glanced at it briefly before reclining, folding his hands. "You believe you are the first one to start digging. You're about to discover what becomes of shovels when they penetrate too deeply." Emily's jaw tightened. "You think hiding children away in files and fake companies keeps your conscience clear?" She was merely 10 years old. Her name was Amari Williams. At the mere mention of the name, something flickered in Holloway's eyes, something ancient and unresolved. "I recall," he said. She exhibited extraordinary neural signatures. We were not experimenting with substances. We were monitoring trends to forecast the next stage of cognition. And yes, it was authorized under national security interests. She was a child, Emily retorted sharply. She was just a statistic, Holloway responded coldly. And that status ended the moment the project was declared too unstable. I did not kill her, bureaucracy did. Latrice stood up. You managed that bureaucracy. You negotiated the arrangements, you handled the funds. But what you did not do was wipe all the evidence. Emily slid a flash drive across the table. This holds financial records, retrieved messages, and 3 statements from your former team members who witnessed those experiments spiral out of control. Control if you refuse to speak with us. The press will. Holloway did not touch the drive. He stared at her for a long moment, then rose and moved toward the window. If you expose this publicly, you will not succeed. You might provoke anger, surely, but the system behind this thrives on outrage. Jenny Rose's voice was steady. We are not trying to win. We aim to complete what she began. He turned slowly. You mean Camille's sister? Camille's breath hitched. I know who you are, he said. Your sister's death was noted in our internal investigation. It was never meant to occur that way. She was not involved with the continuation group. Camille stepped closer, and yet she lies in an unmarked grave. Tell me why. Holloway regarded her not with arrogance, but a tired look. Because she discovered what I have just confirmed to you and refused to stop demanding answers. For a moment, silence filled the space. Latrice moved first. We are finished here. They left the flash drive on the table and exited past the quiet receptionist, through the glass doors, into the chilly breeze outside. The wind struck them like a cleansing force. What now? Jenny asked. Camille gazed at the sun rising over the city. Now we give the world a name to remember. Later that night, Camille uploaded every file, every record, every testimony, every lead they had uncovered, and sent them to 5 investigative reporters, a national legal oversight organization, and one more. A podcast network recognized for exposing corrupt corporations never waited for approval. She anticipated the storm instead. By dawn, the tempest that Camille had foretold started to rage. It began with an anonymous post on a whistleblower forum. Within hours, it had spread through Reddit threads, TikTok reels, narrated by people in their 20s with resolute voices, and Twitter posts under the hashtag Justice for Amari. The files Camille released were carefully examined and pieced together by both amateur detectives and seasoned investigative reporters. Media outlets such as The Atlantic, ProPublica, and even CNN contacted her with follow-up inquiries. Camille did not respond immediately because she was already on the move. She found herself standing in her sister's former neighborhood in southeast Washington, near the playground where Amari used to chant rhymes in sync with jump ropes. The metal slide was now corroded but still carried the faint echoes of the past. A few children were playing tag nearby, and for a brief moment, Camille silently observed them. Then, she turned toward the mural behind her that she had painted herself, showing Amari's vivid eyes looking out beneath swirling lavender and gold. Latrice stepped up beside her and said that CNN had just published an article calling it the most incriminating biotech leak in the last 10 years. Camille gave a weary nod and replied, That is one step, but it is not justice yet. Latrice opened a paper folder she had been holding and said, You need to see this. It is a sworn affidavit from Dr. Gideon Yates, Holloway's former deputy, confirming everything. Names, lab protocols, even more. Mentions of the neurological enhancement experiments frightened him, but he was prepared to testify under oath. Emily's hand trembled slightly as she accepted the documents. That was enough to trigger a federal investigation. Jenny rushed over, out of breath, declaring, We have a problem. What now? Emily asked, steadying herself. Holloway resigned earlier this morning. Officially, the reason was health issues, but unofficially, he was hiring lawyers. Even more troubling, a conflicting story was emerging. What kind of stories? Emily asked. They say you're unstable, that your sister's death pushed you over the edge, and now you are on a personal mission. Some former employee went on Fox News this morning, calling you a conspiracy theorist, consumed by grief and against progress. Emily let out a bitter chuckle. Typical, but it was far from humorous. In the world of media, how people saw you was just as deadly as the facts. The system would never fall on truth alone. It had to hit people emotionally, reaching those watching at home. "I have to go public," Emily said softly, "not just through anonymous tips or records. I need to put my face and voice out there. Let people hear what this has cost me." Latrice frowned. "Are you certain?" Emily looked back at the mural again. Her sister died isolated. She did not deserve to remain just a file name, and neither did the others. Later that afternoon, Emily sat on a folding chair under studio lights in a simple podcast studio in Baltimore. Opposite her was Emma Chen, host of the nationally syndicated show Echoes Unheard. The room was silent except for the soft buzz of condenser microphones, and the subtle ticking of a clock on the wall filled the room. Emma leaned in, saying, "We're rolling whenever you are." Camille took a deep breath and started. "My name is Camille Williams. I am a community nurse, a sister, and someone who could not stop searching for answers about why my younger sister never returned home." She shared her account not as a victim, but as a survivor. Her voice was calm and steady, never shaking, even when describing Amari's bruised hands, her quiet brilliance, and the heartbreaking empty casket at the funeral. She guided the audience through the discovery of confidential files, the hospital's suspicious activities, and the concealed trial information. She spoke about Gideon Yates's sworn statement and the coded language designed to hide non-consensual medical experiments. Then she paused, softening her tone. "I used to think justice meant courtrooms and prison sentences, but justice is about remembering. Justice means calling out names when others stay silent. In this case, justice is a child's story being louder than the institution that tried to erase her." By the time the episode was released, it had been downloaded more than 2,400,000 times. The reaction came quickly. Camille's workplace was flooded with calls, some filled with support, others with hate. Latrice's identity was leaked on obscure websites, and Jenny received threats at her home. Yet something else occurred. Former staff members of Ardent, many long retired, began to come forward. A nurse involved in the early trials confirmed the same laboratory codes Camille had referenced. A laboratory technician confessed to destroying certain documents as instructed, while a mid-level manager secretly forwarded additional emails. Among these was one bearing Holloway's own signature, giving approval for early experiments involving minors. Then came the most surprising communication of all. An assistant from Senator Diane Franklin's office left a voice message expressing the senator's desire for a private meeting with Ms. Carol Williams. The senator had concerns regarding Ardent's previous financial arrangements. Carol stood in her kitchen with the phone still in hand, an untouched cup of chamomile tea cooling on the counter. She glanced up at Latrice, who had been watching from the hallway, and asked, "Have we finally made a breakthrough?" Latrice replied with a cautious look in her eyes, "Maybe. Or perhaps they just want to control the damage." Carol understood that it no longer mattered. The opportunity had presented itself, and she meant to seize it. That night, Carol stood by her window, observing the gentle rain tapping on the glass. The street lamps shimmered through puddles as a young girl wearing a yellow hoodie ran laughing toward her mother across the road. Pressing her hand against the cold window pane, Carol whispered, "Amari, they hear you now." As distant thunder rumbled, she no longer felt powerless, but empowered and prepared. The hearing room was unnervingly cold, fluorescents buzzing incessantly while the beige walls bore witness to countless previous testimonies that had lost their impact. Carol stood behind the microphone, her hands calmly resting, ready to speak her truth. Softly resting on the wooden stand, the plaque before her displayed Public Oversight Committee Special Session on Biomedical Ethics. Cameras were positioned along the back wall while reporters jotted down notes. Senator Diane Franklin occupied the middle seat, surrounded by assistants and co-chairs. Her silver hair was pulled tightly into a bun, and her eyes appeared sharp behind thin, wire-framed glasses. Camille inhaled deeply as the murmurs of the room began to fade. "I did not come here as a politician or a lawyer, or someone pursuing revenge," she stated, her tone steady and each word deliberate. "I came here as a sister, as someone who cared deeply for a young girl named Amari Williams. Amari was 10 years old when she was chosen for what Ardent Biotech described as a routine trial. However, it was neither routine nor safe, nor was it ethical. Camille paused, scanning the faces before her, allowing the silence to weigh heavily in the room. Amari received injections of compounds that had not been thoroughly tested. She suffered seizures, hallucinations, and ultimately, organ failure. We were told it was due to a rare virus and blamed for delaying treatment. But I have reviewed the documents, seen the signatures, and the initials next to her trial identification. This experiment had the approval and endorsement of influential men who now sit behind corporate doors shielded by layers of plausible deniability. Senator Franklin leaned forward and asked, Ms. Wilson, are you claiming that Ardent Biotech deliberately tested unapproved neurological treatments on minors without their informed consent? Camille's expression remained resolute, awaiting the response. He did not show any hesitation, and I possess the documents to confirm it. Signed personally by Dr. Holloway with supervision from private investors connected to federal grants. A soft murmur spread throughout the crowd. From the front row, Latrice nodded slowly, her fingers clasped so tightly that her knuckles appeared enlarged. Beside her, Jenny sat with her laptop open, capturing every reaction, every inquiry, every answer. Many claim justice is blind, Camille insisted. Yet I disagree. I believe justice is simply exhausted. Exhausted from being told to wait patiently, to act respectfully, to trust that the system will eventually fix itself. But trust does not bring lost children back. Trust cannot erase trauma, nor can it remove the billion-dollar shields protecting corporations. Then she reached into her bag and took out a laminated photo of Amari. The girl was wearing her sunflower dress, eyes wide, her smile uneven. Camille placed the picture carefully on the podium. Amari was a child, bright and full of imagination. She composed songs about stars, and once stayed awake all night trying to understand why the dog barked at planes. She mattered deeply and deserves more than to fade away as a redacted notation in a federal document. By the time Camille left the microphone, the room was enveloped in silence, not because of apathy, but out of profound respect. The next day, headlines changed. A biotech company came under federal investigation following whistleblower revelations. The Senate opened an ethics inquiry into unauthorized pediatric experiments. Justice for Amari became the story that captured everyone's attention. The silence was broken, yet true justice, Ethan understood, would not arrive in a headline. It unfolded gradually. It appeared when Latrice's community center experienced a rise in donations aimed at supporting youth science initiatives in Amari's memory. It emerged as Senator Franklin put forward the Amari Williams Biomedical Ethics Act, designed to enhance regulations on clinical trials involving minors. It came when Gideon Yates testified, his voice shaking yet sincere. It surfaced as families nationwide reached out to Camille, sharing their own losses to ambiguous experimental programs and declaring their readiness to speak up. The progress was slow but steady. 1 month later, Camille stood outside a modest community garden established beside the school Emily once attended. A brass plaque at the gate read, "The Amari Hope Garden, where curiosity blooms forever." Children darted among rows of wildflowers, their laughter ringing out from the playground. The sunlight stretched warmly across the earth, golden and gentle. Today, she wore no black. Latrice handed her a trowel, and together they planted a line of lavender. Emily dashed between them, giggling and carrying a plastic watering can. Camille looked at the young girl and smiled. "How is the library job going, Emma?" She beamed. "I get to organize the storybooks, and they said I might help with Saturday readings if I behave." Camille chuckled, moving a strand of hair from Emily's forehead. "You will do more than just behave. You will lead." That night, Camille sat on her porch wrapped in a blanket, cradling a mug of warm cider. The sky stretched above her, spread wide beneath a sky filled with stars. She allowed herself to breathe deeply and fully for the first time in many years. Her phone vibrated with a new message from Jenny, saying, "We just reached 10 million downloads. The last episode aired tonight. Emily people are really listening." She put the phone aside and began to hum slowly. The melody was one she hadn't dared to sing aloud for a long time. the song Ethan had created during their final road trip, silly words about moonlight corn dogs and distant galaxies. Closing her eyes, Camille let the tune enfold her like a cherished memory that would never disappear. Just as she thought was not loud, it was steady, patient, and sometimes it sounded like a sister humming softly into the night, vowing never to stop sharing the truth.